Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second Dine and Learn of the summer. Today is July 15th, 2019. This evening's Dine and Learn is sponsored by the Kaller family. The Zecher Nishmas Mrs. Kaller's father, Rabbi Yaakov Asher ben Yosef Tzvi, and Shem Sharav Aliyah. Further sponsorship opportunities are available. Please speak to Moish. Including next week. So we're talking about Halachah in the Polish Golden Age, which is 1500 to 1650. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the Maharshal this week. But first, a little introduction. So a normal Bezdin requires at least 3 people. A normal Bezdin is 3 people, and then, Sanhedrin, they talk about 21 and 7. At least 3 people you need on a Bezdin, you can add more. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin on Hayam and Aleph says, however, a mumcha l'Rabbi, someone who's an expert, he can judge a case of Dine Mamonos. So civil matters, monetary dispute, you can take 2 to a rabbi. If he's a mumcha, if he's an expert, he can adjudicate that case. So it's a machlokas. The Torah calls the machlokas between the Rosh and the Rambam. His father, the Rosh, says that one expert, that mumcha, counts as a bezdin, and all the rules of bezdin apply. But the Rambam says no, it's not a bezdin, which means that halachas that you know about, for example, Hodah and Kfira, right? If you confess, Moda b'mixas, right? You Moda b'mixas, you agree that you owe a portion of what's claimed. Then you take a shvua, kofar bakol. These are things you heard about. You learn about in Bava Metzia and so on. They don't apply. Additionally, hochsa kafran. If someone is caught in lies, one of the litigants, his claims contradict each other, that doesn't apply either. He could change his claims back and forth all day long, and the mumcha can't do anything about it. So that's the Rambam, because it says it's just you're going to the rabbi and saying, please judge us according to the dinim of Torah, and that's what he does. He hears all the claims, all the final claims at least, and then he does the calculation and figures out what the din should be. Okay, so in 1547, give or take, Shimon had a liquor monopoly, hard liquor, whiskey, someplace in Lithuania, which means, this was basically a feudal place. So the nobleman sold Shimon the right, you have the monopoly on whiskey for 3 years, which means you import it, you gotta smear the nobleman, you gotta pay whatever it takes, bribe whoever it takes, and then you can import and sell and make a profit, hopefully. If not, Shimon's problem. Before the 3 years were up, Reuven went in and he bought the next 3 years. And Shimon said, wait a minute, what are you doing? You didn't even give me a chance to bid on it, and already you outbid me, and you bought it. You stepped into my territory. So they took it to the Rav of Ludmir, Rav Yitzchak ben Bezalel, the Rav of Ludmir. In those days, he was one of the big poskim in Poland, Greater Poland. His grandson, was a Taz.
Well, what's the underlying issue? Again, what? If it's a 3-year
That's the question.
It's a 3-year contract.
Well, the question is what is the issue? So we'll get to that. But so they went to the Rav of Ludmir, who was known as a posik, and he personally alone judged the case. And he said, Shimon gets the monopoly. And of course, you can't tell the nobleman, we're not going to pay you as much as this guy, as Reuven promised. So Reuven has to pay the extra. So let's say it was $1 million, and then Reuven bid it up to 1.1 million. So Shimon pays the 1.1 million because he has to, and Reuven reimburses him for the extra 0.1. Reuven wasn't happy, as you can imagine. So he went to the Maharshal, who was not too far away. And he brought his case to the Maharshal. And the Maharshal wrote this massive treatise, broken up into 2 tshuvas in there, where he pillars, if that's the right word, or pillories, the Rav who paskined originally. He doesn't mention him by name. He had the courtesy not to mention him by name, but we know from other sources who that is. Interesting thing, though, if you look at tshuvas Aleph and Tes Vav and Shut Maharshal, he sent the tshuva. So he signs it, Shlomo Luria. Hold on, let me take a look. Exactly what he said. Right, Divrei Shlomo ben Moreno HaRav Yechiel Luria Zatzal Hanirka Sar Yitzchak. And then there's an extra line added on. Yafe Kivin Vekasav Ha'oluf Hagon Akacha Kimisina Lemoshe Halacha Neum Yitzchak Bar Betzalel Zal Hagar Beludmir. So he sent the tshuva to the Rav of Ludmir, who gave his approval and said, I agree with this. As if the Rav of Ludmir, who was an older person, was the senior posek, And the Maharshal was sending to him to get Haskama. He did it on another tshuva as well. But here the Maharshal, no holds barred. He calls him basically an Amaretz. He makes mistakes that a child wouldn't make. And so it's broken down into two tshuvas, tshuva lamed hey and tshuva lamed vav. And this is something about the Maharshal, because he was such a genius in his generation. The Maharshal didn't go to yeshiva. He learned I spent actually a lot of time the past week trying to figure out the timeline of the Maharshal's life. I couldn't figure it out. I asked some friends. I got the most recent dissertation done on the Maharshal's life. Someone a PhD in Bar Ilan on the Maharshal's life. They couldn't figure it out either. Nobody could figure out his life. But definitely what you see on Wikipedia is wrong. In Wikipedia, it says that he learned by the yeshiva of Reb Shalom Shachna in Lublin, which we talked about last week. I saw that. I said, that can't be. He hated Reb Shalom Shachna. Because Reb Shalom Shachna was about pilpul. This Gemara, that. And he created, really intense and creative interpretations. The Maharshal is old school. Let's just learn the Gemara Pshat and so on. So this is interesting in the relationship between the Maharshal and Reb Shalom Shachna. So we spoke last week. The printing press had been invented in 1455 with movable type. So the Maharshal was basically living in the second generation. So they already printed the Shas, and it was full of mistakes. And that's why if you look in the back of the Vilna Gemara, you see like the Maharshal and the Maharshal and the Maharam. They very often say Kain Sarich Lomar, right? They just say the text of the Gemara, Kain Sarich Lomar, and you look in the Gemara, it says that. What are they adding? Well, because they didn't have the Vilna Shas in front of them. The Vilna Shas was already corrected. They had the old Shas, which was full of mistakes, and they were fixing it. So in 1568, they started publishing the Shas Lublin, based on the text of Reb Shalom Shachna. So the Maharshal, the first volume, I think had Sukkah and Eruvin, or in the same year they published Sukkah and Eruvin. So on Eruvin, the Maharshal went to town on the Hagos of Reb Shalom Shachna. Yeah, he's making mistakes here. He doesn't understand Pshat. This he gets Pshat wrong. That because of the text of the Gemara. So they had a very the Maharshal, but he was recognized as the Gadol Hador. He was the genius. So he had that confidence, and people had confidence in him. So here also, he took on Rabbi Yisuk ben Bezalel, who was older than him, who was known as a posek, and the Maharshal held his weight. He wrote this really long, 2 tshuvas. As we'll see in a moment, he sent it to someone else to get approval. So first issue was that the Rav of Ludmir had passed it alone. So why is that a problem? It's the Gemara says you can. Mumcha l'Rabim. So he's a Mumcha. Who's greater Mumcha than one of the big poskim? So the answer is, it's a mission of Pirkei Avos. Al tehi dan yechidi. You shouldn't judge on your own. So it's not, the Rishonim already asked, what do you mean? The Gemara says you can be a Mumcha l'Rabim, can judge on his own. The Mishnah says you shouldn't. So basically the answer is, it's advice. It's not a good idea to judge on your own. Technically you can. It's not a good idea. So the Maharshal says, okay, so it's a bad idea. So why did he do it? He shouldn't have done it. It was a bad idea. And just so you shouldn't think I made up this whole thing about the Maharshal having a hard personality. The Nod B'Yehuda himself says, Libo Kelev Ha'aryeh. He had a lion heart, the Maharshal, because he was very strong. He criticized the Beis Yosef, who lived at the same time. Well, the Beis Yosef missed this Gemara, he missed that Gemara. That was the Maharshal's. He no holds barred. So he criticized Rabbi Yisuk ben Bezalel for not heeding the advice of Pirkei Avos. And then he quotes the Smag, and this all hinges on the language of the Smag, because when the Smag quotes this contradiction, right, between the Gemara in Sanhedrin and the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, so he said it even applies to a mumcha. So what do you mean it even applies to a mumcha? The implication is, if it even applies to a mumcha, so it certainly applies to a non-mumcha, that he can't be done yechidi, he can't judge on his own. So how says the Maharshal, how could it be? What's the case of when a non-mumcha would even possibly be in the parsha of judging case on his own? It must be the litigants went before him, and they agreed, and they said, you know what, we know you're not a mumcha, we'll take it, you're the best that we got, we live in a small town, you're not a mumcha, but you're the biggest Talmud Chacham, closest thing that we have to a Talmud Chacham. And then, even then, and then on that, the Mishnah says, don't do it. And even a mumcha shouldn't do it either. So the Maharshal says, even though the litigants, Reuven and Shimon, accepted the Rav of Ludmir to be their Dayan, shouldn't have done it. So the Maharshal sent his treatise to the Dayan of Krakow. The Dayan of Krakow is going to be an important figure. You probably never heard of him. His name is Rav Yosef Katz. He has tshuvas called Sheris Yosef. He's most famous for his younger brother-in-law, Rav Moshe Isserles. So we spoke last week. Rav Moshe Isserles married the daughter of Rav Shlomo Shachna, the chief rabbi of Poland, and the big Rosh Yeshiva in Lublin. At 20 years old, he was appointed the Rav of Krakow, and at 22 years old, in 1552, there was a plague in Krakow, and his grandmother, mother, and wife died at the same time. Not long after, within the year, he remarried to the daughter of the richest Talmud Chacham in Krakow, so he was Baruch Hashem set for life. And he also now had his brother-in-law who was the Dayan of Krakow, or the biggest Dayan in Krakow. So Maharshal respected him so much that he sent him these tshuvos to say, what do you think? You know, I'm going against one of the biggest, oldest poskim in Poland, what do you think? And Rabbi Yosef Katz disagreed with almost every single point that Maharshal had, but agreed with his conclusion. So on this particular point that we just discussed, the Smag, he says, I don't think that's a good diuk. I don't think that's a good inference from the Smag. Because he said, even a momcha, meaning a non-momcha also might judge alone. And how could that be? It must be when they accepted him. He said, no, there are all sorts of cases where a non-momcha might be the judge. They had no one else. They went to the Bezdin, and two of the Dayanim were on vacation, and you had this third guy. What are they supposed to do? They can't wait till after vacation. So it's not like they accepted him. They had no choice. Says Rav Yosef Katz that if kiblu aleihim, if they accept a judge, anything goes. You're allowed to judge it on your own. If that's what they want, that's what they want. They go to you and say, please, Rabbi Mendelson, please, we have a din Torah, we don't want to go to a Bezdin, you just decide. If they accept it, that's good. He said, in this case, Reuven and Shimon accepted, you can't have that taina on Rav Yitzchak ben Bezalel. So the Shach in Siman Gimel quotes these two tshuvas, the tshuva of the Maharshal and the tshuva of Yosef Katz and Sheris Yosef. Sometimes he calls him the Sheris Yosef, sometimes he calls him the Maharich. So if you ever seen a Shach, the Shach lived maybe a generation or two after. So he knew the Dayan of Krakow. Nowadays, we don't know so much. But if you ever see, he quotes Sheris Yosef, Maharich Katz, or the Maharich, that's Rav Yosef Katz. So the Shach brings a raya from the Yerushalmi and Sanhedrin, which is very, very clear. Yerushalmi and Sanhedrin, Rabbi Abahu was sitting at the gates of Caesarea, and he would judge any cases that were brought before him. And his Talmidim said, how can you do it? It says, Al-Dahi Dan Yechidi, submission Pirkei Avos, Rabbi Abahu, what are you doing? And he said, don't worry, they accept me on them, so I can judge on my own. That's pretty clear cut, right? That's pretty clear cut. So he used that as a raya against the Maharshal. I don't know how he answered, unless you say we don't pass him like that, Yerushalmi. You should probably need a raya for that. But the Shach adds, nowadays we don't have a mumcha. There's no such thing as a mumcha nowadays. We just don't have that in his day. Even the Shach's day, even in the Shach's day, he says, we don't have such mumcha. The Rishonim already said that. We don't have such experts as they used to have in the times of the Talmud, so nobody should ever judge on their own. But the Shach adds, if it's really just a simple matter, so then you could do it. Or if the litigants say, we just want you to arbitrate. You don't have to give us the din Torah. You might, you're not a mumcha on din Torah, fine. Just tell us what to do and we'll follow whatever you say, even if it's against the Torah. So if litigants do that, either way, then they can, then you can have one judge. The Ketsos goes even further and he says, no, why can't you? You shouldn't do that. Why not? Because of what we said before, the Rambam. Because then you don't have any modeh b'miktzas, you don't have any kofar bakol. That the litigant can change his claims over and over. It says, so no. Never judge on your own. Always have a bezdin. Always have at least three. Okay. So on that, it seems like the Maharshal in the history of Psak was he lost the case on that. Lost the argument on that specific point. Okay, so let's go back to the case. Shimon had the monopoly. This is Shaya, what you were asking about. And then Reuven came and he bought it for the next 3 years. So the Maharshal quotes the Gemara in Kiddushin Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph. Okay. We'll just say it outside because it's actually a complicated Gemara inside. Ani ha-mehapich b'charora. Have you heard this case? It's very relevant. It's very relevant nowadays, or maybe it's not so relevant.
What chapter is this?
Kedushin Daf Tesam Aleph. A poor person who is looking at a loaf of bread, and he wants to acquire it. He's saying, maybe I should take it. Maybe I should just pick it up and take it. And then someone walks by and grabs it before the poor person can get it. So that, the Gemara says, he's called a rasha if you do that. If someone is almost about to take something, and you rush ahead and take it, so like if the one piece of kugel left at Kiddush, and someone has his fork going down, and then you're quicker, you use your hands.
It happens every week.
So that might fall under the case here of you nikra rasha. You're called a rasha. You shouldn't do that. So Rashi, according to Rashi, you would be. Rashi says it applies to everything. If you find something that's not yours, if you're working on an acquisition, the simple case is that you're a merchant, and you find something that you think you could sell for a profit. My uncle used to tell me, buy low, sell high. That's the secret to life. So you see something, the ani wants to buy the loaf of bread and then sell it down the street, across town when they're not so close to the bakery. So you're depriving him of earning a living. So that's a simple case. Rashi says it even applies to mitzvah. So Rabbeinu Tam says, wait a second, there's a kasha, because there's a Mishnah about mitzvah, Daf Yud Amud Aleph, that if you fall on top of a mitzvah, you find something, not yours, ownerless, you fall on top of it, someone else can come and just grab it and take it. Because there's no kinyan. You have to be kinyan. You have to acquire it in one of the forms of acquisition. You need to lift it. Whatever the forms of acquisition are, you need to acquire it. Falling on top of it doesn't count. So that's Rabbeinu Tam. What do you mean? How could you have more of an ani amhape b'charara than that? You literally fell on top of it, and someone is sticking their hands underneath you and grabbing it. You had dibs. You called dibs. So he says it must not apply to a mitzvah. It only applies to an acquisition or renting or anything, any kind of business transaction. Because, so this loaf of bread, you won't make a schora on that. You won't have business on that. But you know what? There are other schoras out there, you'll find it. If you're not selling wrenches, you'll sell windows, you'll sell doors, you'll sell doorknobs. Lots of things you can buy and sell. A mitzvah, who says you'll ever find another mitzvah? You can't go down the street and find something, someone leaves a $100 bill here. It doesn't mean there's another one down the street. So mitzvah says Rabbeinu Tam, no, whoever gets it, gets it. Finders, keepers, applies to mitzvah. So why is this nogeya? So the Maharshal says it's nogeya for two reasons. First, he argues at great length that almost all Rishonim hold like Rabbeinu Tam and not like Rashi. And on that, it's a little questionable. So Rav Yosef Katz disagrees on this Rishon, on that Rishon, and he's not so sure that everybody agrees with Rashi. Everybody agrees with Rabbeinu Tam and not Rashi. That mitzvah, it doesn't apply on Yom Mehapek B'charara, and therefore you could grab it. But he wants to say that might be the case of Shimon and Reuven. Shimon had this monopoly, and clearly he wanted to extend it further and further. It was his business. And Reuven comes, and he takes it away from him. So it seems like an aniyah mahapik b'charara. So the Maharshal has to find a way out of it. And that's what the tshuva is all about. Why does aniyah mahapik b'charara not apply to the cases of monopoly? So first Maharshal says like this follows. The Gemara that says the money of a nachri is like a midbar. So what does that mean? Obviously, you can't steal from a nachri. That's against other gemaras. So the way the Rishonim understand it is that kesek, the normal kinyonim, do not work by nachri. That's why when you sell your chametz, it's so hard to do. It's complicated. You need a rabbi to do it because the normal kinyonim don't work. If you pay kesef, there's no kinyan that you get it from the nachri. So what's happening with this monopoly or this right to sell the hard liquor? You're paying for it. And the nachri, the nobleman, is withdrawing his claim, and then it becomes hefker. And then you reach out and grab it, and you're kona it. So it's hefker, you're being kona from hefker, that's a mitzvah. So says the Maharshal, therefore, according to Rabbeinu Tam, aniyah mahabet b'chara doesn't apply, because really it's a mitzvah. We would have thought it's a kinyan. We would have thought it's an acquisition, but because it's from a nachri, it's technically a mitzvah. It's a little hard to digest, but he goes further. He says, what are you buying? What is he buying? What is Shimon or Reuven buying from this nobleman? He's not buying liquor.
Right.
He's buying the right. Well, what is this right? There's no such thing as a right in Halachah. The right to sell? There's no. What are you making a kinyan on?
What did Yaakov buy?
That's a good question. He was buying the
Right.
bechor. So that's a davar shelo bo la'olam, right? So that's the kasha. How could he buy a davar shelo bo la'olam?
He was buying rights.
But that is literally a davar shelo bo la'olam. So how could you buy it? That's the question. So here it's twice. He says either it's a davar shelo bo la'olam, it doesn't exist right now, or it's a davar she'ein bo mamish, and therefore a kinyan can't apply to it. So therefore, Adiyam Hapik B'chara doesn't apply at all. You're not really buying anything, you're not really owning anything, and he's not coming and taking it from you. At most, what's really happening is Reuven is causing Shimon damage, causing him financial damage. He now loses this ability to make a parnasa. But that's called Grama Ben Izakin. It's indirect damage, and Reuven is not chayev we're not chayev for indirect damages. So therefore, he says Reuven is not chayev to pay anything, and Reuven gets the monopoly rights, and Shimon loses out. So Rav Katz basically disagrees with all this, but he adds one other point. He says none of this really applies, because what did Shimon buy? Shimon bought the rights for 3 years. What does Shimon have at the end of 3 years? He has a profit that he made, but other than that, he has got nothing. It disappears. Even if Reuven did nothing, it disappears. So Reuven just came in and started fresh, bought something that no one had any rights to. So there was no stepping on anyone's footsteps or anything like that. So we're running out of time. So I'll just say Rav Katz ends with this fantastic cautionary note. Because Reuven's argument was that, you know what, this is how monopoly rights work. Everybody has done it since the beginning of history. He's got it for 3 years, so you know what, I'm going to bid up, and I'm going to get it, and you have to make the calculations to make sure you're still going to earn a profit. So Rav Yosef Katz says, the Sheris Yosef says, you know what, I don't care if everybody does it. That doesn't make it okay. Just because everybody does, my mother would say, just because everybody jumps off the George Washington Bridge doesn't mean you have to jump off the George Washington Bridge also. Just because everybody does it doesn't make it mutter al pi halacha. That's not an excuse. So the Maharshal had a Talmud. There was one Talmud who you might see also quoted like the Shach and the Taz, Masas Ben Yomin, Ben Yomin Slonik. A little obscure, but he's quoted by the Nosei Kalim, because in his days he was a big name. He was a Talmud of both the Ramah and the Maharshal. And in Mr. Shem, in a few weeks, we'll see some cases of when he quotes them both, disagreeing, and he, as a Talmud, has to decide which Rebbe to follow. So he was asked almost the exact same question as the Maharshal, probably 30, 40 years later. And he says, my Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, my Rebbe has a tshuva. And he talks at length going through all the rayos of the Maharshal. And he agrees with everything. He's not going to disagree with his Rebbe on this. And somehow he ends up with a psak that's the exact opposite. He passes like the second guy, not like the first guy. Like the first guy, and not like the second guy. And he says you have to give back all the money, and the first guy has the rights. So then he says, wait, but don't tell me that my Rebbe, the Maharshal, passing like the second guy, and I passing like the first guy. The cases are clearly very different. I have no idea why they're different. He explains why they're different. I guess I need to spend more time working on this. They seem like almost the exact same cases. I don't understand why they're different. But here's something that I found interesting. The Shach, on this halacha, in Choshen Mishpat in Reish Lamed Zayin, so he quotes the tshuva of the Maharshal about Ani HaMehapek B'Charara. He quotes the tshuva of the Maharshal. He quotes the tshuva of the Masas Ben Yomin. He does not quote the Sheris Yosef. But he clearly knew the Sheris Yosef because he quoted it before that we talked about being Dan Yechidi, about being a single solitude judge. So why did the Shach decide not to quote the Sheris Yosef on this halacha? I don't know. He must have just not agreed with anything that he had to say and didn't feel like it was worth mentioning. So in Yis Hashem, next week we'll continue with the tshuvas from the Golden Age of Poland. Thank you.